Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm gonna continue covering the games from the Vrsar Open. So after 5 rounds I had 2 wins and 3 draws. A very good score considering that I beat a FIDE master and drew and I am in a winning position. Round 6 I'm playing Vojak. He was staying in the same house as me, so we know each other. And one thing I remember from the game is that at some point during the opening, I wanted to get a cup of coffee, and I said, Daniel, do you want coffee? When I made my move, he said yes. And I brought us coffees to go in those to-go cups. And he stood up, he literally walked around for 5 seconds and threw the coffee into the trash can that was coincidentally near our board. And I thought that he threw the coffee away, and I was furious. And then I glanced into the trash can and it was, empty. So the quickest coffee drinker in the world. In any case, he's a FIDE master, he's a very strong player, and he always plays the English. And the day before the round, we were sitting on the terrace of the house, and Nenad Doric, who was the arbiter of the tournament, was sitting there with us, and I was preparing for the game. Vojak wasn't there, obviously. And we were debating what I should play. So I have one game with c4, e5, and I like the structures, but they are very sharp, and I think Vojak knows them. Normally, I would play c6 against the English going into the Semislav or the Caro-Kann, which is what Vojak said he'd been expecting me to play. But I decided to play something else. Doric suggested a plan which doesn't really go into reverse Dutch, but it's sort of a Queen's Indian, Nimzo-Indian Dutch hybrid, and I played b6. The full PGN on the English for both sides is available in the shop on my Patreon page. You can purchase it separately, or you can join Patreon, support the channel for just $3 a month, and gain access to the English, as well as 20 other full repertoires, including d4, e4, the Sicilian, the Caro-Kann, the London, and more, as well as 500 other posts. So b6 is a very flexible move, and the most common way to play against this is, of course, to go knight c3, bishop b7, and to play e4. So you're just challenging the light square diagonal, but now, after e6, knight f3, and bishop b4, white already needs to be slightly careful, because a careless move like, I don't know, bishop e2 already leads to bishop c3, dc3, and bishop e4. So one of the more common moves here is bishop d3, which is already, in my opinion, not really the English. It's slightly uncomfortable. But Vojak played knight f3, which I was happy to see, because now we're going to play a sort of normal opening if he plays d4, which he did. And I've been playing the Nimzo and the Queen's Indian. So I know the hanging pawn structure, I can go into the IQP, and I was quite happy to see this. So here g3 is, by far the most common, but you have to accept the structure after bishop f3, ef3, which I think is favorable for black. He played e3. I went e6, bishop e2, and now there are 3 ways to play. You can go d5, you can go f5, or you can be flexible with knight f6. Originally, I'd intended to go f5 into a favorable Dutch, where, white doesn't have a fianchettoed bishop, but, and this was still my prep. I knew that was slightly risky. I did spend some time here, and then finally decided to play knight f6, because during my prep I hadn't really decided what to do here, because this was a highly unlikely variation. So castles, bishop e7, and okay, a3 is, I think, a mistake. The engine says black is equal now, and I can go either c5, d5, or castle, and it's a waste of time because I'd already moved my bishop. He sort of wants to go b4, but not really. So I think a3 was unnecessary. So castles, knight c3, and now c5. And after d4, we have a very, very standard position where, white is playing a structure that's not very ambitious, because firstly, the bishop is on c1. Secondly, there's no bishop on g3, so black is more than equal, and the engine says black is slightly better here. And of course, I have an easy way to gain a small edge: cd, ed, and d5. Now c5 loses a pawn, you should take on d5, because if I take on c4, you will still be forced to recapture with the bishop. So he took, I took with the knight, of course, and bishop d3. Now the only thing I have to be slightly careful about is, Greek gift ideas, but they don't work now because I'm covering g5, and the other knight is going to join the defense very quickly. So I played knight d7, he played bishop c2, a very, simple plan, threatening queen d3. So I was debating between rook c8 here and what I did, which is bishop f6. If I go rook c8, I'm threatening to win a pawn. So, queen d3 doesn't really do that much because I can go g6 or knight df6. But let's say bishop d2 covering the knight and queen c7 threatening the pawn again, rook c1. Now I'm not threatening the pawn, but I'm lining up more pieces here, and no captures work because of bishop h7 in the end, so probably queen b8. And I wasn't really happy about this position. It seemed like I don't really have that much. So I played bishop f6. My opponent played rook e1, which is fine, and now I was debating between a normal developing move like rook e8, which also helps me play knight f8 in the event of queen d3, and the very simple knight c3, which according to the engine gives black a significant advantage already. So bc3, rook c8, queen d3, g6, and I don't know, something like bishop f4. I can now go b5, and my plan, of course, is to play knight b6, knight c4, and this is a position after a successful minority attack, basically. a4 doesn't work. a4 is the only tempting move, but a4, bishop f3, queen f3, b4, and black's winning. Let me just show you that. So I was calculating this. Bishop f3, queen f3, b4, and that's about it. I mean, it's the end of the game. But what I didn't like here is if, white doesn't play e4. So a4, excuse me. What if they go rook b1 or even bishop d6? And I just didn't want to allow this. I didn't want to trade dark squared bishop with bishop e7, which is what I would have played. So I wasn't convinced. Of course, the engine gives black a massive advantage, but I'm not as good as the engine. Okay, so I castled, or excuse me, I played rook e8, and I was preparing for queen d3. I didn't want to go g6, I wanted to go knight f8 to make sure I don't create any hooks for h4, h5. My opponent continued with knight e4. I don't really care about knight f6. I think that would be a great position for me, because after knight f6, I still have a very solid blockade, and I can take on f3. If queen takes, of course, queen d4. If g takes, then that's fine. So I played rook c8. My plan was to go rook e7, rook ec7, double up the rooks and challenge the bishop. That's the best plan according to the engine. It's also the most natural move because my rook wasn't doing anything. Bishop d2, rook e7, rook a d1. Okay, now I would like you to pause the video and see if there are any forcing moves for black that seem good to you. Okay, so the first forcing move is, of course, queen c7 or rook ec7. Those are the simplest ones, and this was the move I'd been planning to play. And now after something like bishop b3, probably knight g6, I don't know, maybe white has to go g3. I would say that they do, because I'm threatening knight f4, so g3, and nah, it's okay. Alternatively, if I go queen c7, then maybe bishop b3 or even bishop b1, maybe knight f4. Queen c7 covers f4, so that's good. Vojak told me after the game that he was afraid of queen c7 and knight f4, and I did see that, but I saw something what I thought was stronger. I played bishop a6, which is a fine move. There's nothing wrong with bishop a6. It's not the strongest move, but it does trade off light squared bishops, which is important for black, I think, because my bishop is significantly worse than black's bishop. And I can then move on to conquering f4. So obviously they have to take. At some point, whether they take on f6 first or take on a6 is irrelevant. They are going to have to take, because there's no comfortable way to defend the bishop. If you go queen b3, then of course bishop c4, and this is very bad. So on bishop a6, if they take straight away, that's fine. You have to calculate a lot of lines, and the lines mainly involve whether they take on f6 or not, queen a6, rook c2, and bishop c3, trapping my rook. So obviously the critical move is knight f6, and I can take with the g-pawn to make sure I don't lose a tempo and to make sure I don't allow bishop c3, but I don't really want to take with the g-pawn because that sort of ruins my structure. Then again, I am covering the e5 square, so from a Caro-Kann player's perspective, gf is the superior move regardless of the rook trap on c2. So I should have taken gf6. And let's say gf6, queen a6, rook c2. Now there is no bishop c3. You know, white probably has to play, I don't know, rook c1 maybe? Maybe rook b1, covering the pawn. If rook c1, I'm not sure I can get away with rook b2. If rook b2, maybe rook c8, and, you know, the rook's infiltrating. So I would have traded. But on knight f6, I took knight f6 because I saw a way to save my rook. Queen a6, rook c2, bishop c3. And now I played knight d5. Obviously, if my knight had already been on d5, I would just take the bishop, win a pawn, and, you know, have a winning position. And now queen d3. And this was my calculation. I take on c3, the rook on c2 is not immune, but if they take, I take on d1. So bc3. And now pause the video again. One move loses, one move is fine. Where do you put your rook? I lost the game in a single move here. The way, firstly, I hadn't even considered the good move for a long time because I saw that the losing move works. It does not, but I thought it did. The good move is rook b2, and the reason rook b2 works is because I get to pin the queen along the c file. So c4, threatening queen c3, okay, queen c8, excuse me, queen c3, rook b5, and that's the only way to actually save the rook. Because now if you take the rook, I take the queen. This is well beyond me when I'm calculating, you know, bishop a6 on move 17. So I should have seen this before playing bishop a6. And of course, you know, I did not see it. So we got this position, knight d5, queen d3. On move 21, sorry, takes bc3. On move 22. So 5 moves later, I played rook a2, the losing move. And the reason it's losing is extremely simple. I'd missed something when calculating bishop a6. And my biggest fault is that I hadn't double-checked my calculation at this point. So my opponent, before playing rook a2, my opponent played c4, obviously. And I have only one way to stay in the game, which is queen d6. And white has a very simple winning move, which Vojak didn't see. He played something equally winning, which I totally dismissed during my calculation of bishop a6. White to play and win c5. That's it. Blocks the queen from a3. I have to play queen d5. I have to. I don't know what else. If I take on c5, then simply queen b3 is winning. For the same reason queen d5 is losing. On queen d5, there is rook e5, and I have no way to do anything. I don't know, queen c6, and now queen b3, and my rook is lost. And on c5, if I take, then of course queen b3, queen d5, and the rook on e7 hangs. And I didn't see that. When I played queen d6, I saw that c5 was winning, but I had sort of hoped that he wouldn't play it. He might miss it. Had he played c5, I would have resigned straight away because I saw what was going on. He didn't. He played rook e3, and I got excited that, you know, I may draw. I cannot draw. I have only one way to complicate things, and that's e5. And now on queen b3, I go e4, trying to, you know, lose the exchange instead of a rook, but it doesn't work. The knight can go anywhere. Knight e1, and now my rook is trapped. I have to take on f2. And obviously it's losing. I should have resigned. I did not, because, you know, white can still go wrong. And he's a friend, so I'm sure he didn't find it disrespectful. King f2, queen takes h2. I mean, there are tricks. You could lose this as white. It's unlikely, but you could. Rook h3, queen f4 check, king g1, knight e6, and queen g3 is just... At this point I knew that there were no more tricks. I obviously have to decline the queen trade, queen b8, knight f8. Rook e6, I want to do something. I'm not doing anything though. Knight e3. The pawn is queening. I'm trying to set up tricks, but there are no tricks. And here I resigned. Obviously it was hopeless when I had to take on f2, but a lesser player may have blundered something. So I see a recurring pattern in my games against stronger players. Against many of them, I remember one game distinctly against Lorenzo Lodici, whom I've faced in the Graz Open in round 2. I had a perfectly fine position, just like this one, and I made a very risky decision, which cost me the game. Now, I wouldn't say calculating bishop a6 is easy, and seeing the idea with rook b2, queen c8, rook b5 is easy, but it's also very difficult not to make a mistake when playing a move like bishop a6, unless your calculation is perfect. Therefore, playing a move like bishop a6 is unnecessary. It's not justified. It's an unnecessary risk and complicating a position that's perfectly healthy and you know, better for black. A very normal move like queen c7 gives me an advantage, or keeps my advantage, and I saw it. I played rook c8 and rook e7, wanted to play rook e7. I should have made a normal move. So after this game, I decided not to take unnecessary risks anymore, unless I'm absolutely certain that the line I'm looking at works. So as you're going to see in about 3 more games, I'm going to show you in the next couple of days, I have had an opportunity to enter something similarly risky, but I declined it on 2 opportunities and actually played it once when it was definitely working. So I lost the game. This is my first loss of the tournament, absolutely deserved. The fact that I had a better position is meaningless because I self-destructed in a single move. Again, not that bishop a6 is a bad move. It's a fine move, but seeing why is well beyond me. Thank you for watching. I hope you got bishop a6 right and that you managed to find rook b2. I did not. I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.